This message comes from Vital Farms, who works with small American farms to bring you pasture-raised eggs. Click the play button to hear from pasture-raised egg farmer Tanner Pace, who shares the sights and sounds he and his hens experience on the rolling hills of his family farm in southern Missouri.
Escalation in President Trump's military actions in Latin America. Yesterday, the Pentagon announced the deployment of the USS Gerald Ford, the world's largest aircraft carrier, just hours after the 10th U.S. strike on alleged drug vessels in the Caribbean and Pacific. NPR senior political contributor Ron Elving joins us. Ron, thanks for being with us.
Good to be with you, Scott.
The president said there could also be U.S. land strikes. How serious is the situation now?
It's as serious as it looks and was meant to look. The world's largest aircraft carrier with 5,000 sailors, scores of aircraft, 8 additional warships. You know, some of these small boat operators may begin to feel a bit outgunned. But you have to wonder if it's really all about the drug runners. Let's accept that the 10 blasted on the high seas so far were carrying drugs and were heading this way, although there have been reports raising questions on both counts. Setting those doubts aside, the sheer size of this naval force suggests something else. Something like the, quote, gunboat diplomacy, unquote, the U.S. has practiced as far back as the early 1900s, pressuring regimes in Central America and the Caribbean.
President Trump said he's holding trade talks with Canada over an ad in Ontario featuring Ronald Reagan, which, by the way, has subsequently been withdrawn. The president called the ad fake, was it?
The voice in the ad is Ronald Reagan's, and the words are from a radio address he gave in April 1987. But the ad is guilty of changing the order of sentences, and that is wrong. The ad also ought to have made clear that Reagan was about to impose a tariff on Japanese semiconductors at the time, despite his own dislike of tariffs and his strong preference for free trade. Now, the Reagan Foundation called this out, published a link to the audio and transcript, and to their credit, the provincial officials in Ontario who paid for this ad in the first place have also published that same link. And everyone who cares ought to check it out. They will find Reagan condemning tariffs in no uncertain terms as a prelude to trade wars and deep economic harm.
The U.S. government is in its 4th week of a shutdown. More than 1 million federal workers missed a paycheck yesterday. What could end this? Air traffic controllers, Obamacare premiums going up?
And maybe both. It was the absentee problem among air traffic controllers that ended the last shutdown, the record 5-week-long freeze-up in 2019. This time, the Democrats say it's all about health care. Premium subsidies for people on Obamacare. Much higher bills are about to hit home for millions of Americans, and they live disproportionately in states that voted for Trump. So there could be some rising tension there. The Republicans in Congress say the Democrats just want to fight, and they say for their part, there's nothing to negotiate. My guess is that they would be back at the negotiating table on Monday if summoned by the president, but he does not seem to be so inclined.
Ron, the East Wing of the White House was demolished this week to make way for a new ballroom President Trump wants built. Why did the demolition of the East Wing seem to strike a chord with so many?
It's the permanence of the look of it. You know, they knocked down the whole east wing of the White House, carried off in trucks, with some of it going to a golf course. It's not coming back. And for many people, that is a metaphor for all that's happening in Trump's second term. I have to confess, this is a hard one for people who care about the White House, the tradition, the symbolic value. Just a few days ago, Trump said he was only making some adjustments and modifications to the East Wing. Then this week, after demolition had begun, he said architects and engineers needed to take the whole thing down in order to build the ballroom Trump wanted. A ballroom financed not by the people, but by Amazon and Apple and Google and Meta, some major government contractors and Wall Street billionaires. The ballroom they build may well be impressive, but what has been lost in this process will not easily be replaced.
NPR's Ron Elving, thanks so much.
Thank you, Scott.
And President Trump is heading to Asia for a 6-day diplomatic tour of the region. Among the leaders he's expected to meet is, of course, China's President Xi Jinping. Relations remain fraught between the two countries over the deepening trade war. We're joined now by NPR's Anthony Kuhn in South Korea. Anthony, thanks so much for being with us.
My pleasure, Scott.
Give us a sense of what's on the agenda.
Well, President Trump's itinerary centers on two summits, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations in Malaysia and the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation in South Korea. But President Trump is more focused on bilateral meetings, and there's some criticism in the region that ASEAN and APEC are multilateral forums. They're promoting regional integration and free trade, while the U.S. seems to be focused on great power competition and trade protectionism. President Trump wants to preside over a Thai-Cambodian ceasefire deal, apparently to burnish his peacemaker image, which has led to some criticism in the region that Trump is more focused on himself than Southeast Asia. There's certainly no conflict and a shortage of conflicts that he could try to end, such as Myanmar's brutal civil war, but he doesn't seem interested in that one.
President is expected to meet, as we mentioned, his Chinese counterpart. How do you believe he'll handle that meeting?
Well, it's tough. Trade tensions have flared, and both sides are trying to pressure the other one with tariffs and export controls. U.S. and Chinese trade officials are meeting in Kuala Lumpur to try to de-escalate that. If the talks fall through, a Xi Jinping-Trump meeting might not even happen, and the Chinese side has not confirmed that there will be this meeting. I spoke to Zhu Feng, who is Dean of the School of International Studies at Nanjing University. Here's what he told me. If the negotiations in Malaysia get no results, he told me, then the resulting U.S. China split will be very worrying. He adds that China has already endured unendurable treatment from the U.S., and it's got to push back to show that it will not be cornered by the U.S.
President Trump is also known for his skepticism toward allies as well. What can we expect from meetings with countries that include Japan and South Korea?
Well, President Trump will meet in Japan with the country's new female prime minister, Sanae Takaichi, and in South Korea with President Lee Jae-myung. And the U.S. has gotten both of these allies to pledge a combined nearly $1 trillion in investment in the U.S. in exchange for lower tariffs. But there are still differences, such as how much of that is paid upfront in cash. And if the allies aren't happy with the details, they could try to negotiate. If the U.S. isn't happy with that, it could reimpose tariffs. Both Seoul and Tokyo are under pressure from the U.S. to pay more for military protection and to help the U.S. confront China. President Trump said on the way to Malaysia that he is open to meeting with North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un, but apparently there are no plans for that to happen so far.
This is President Trump's first trip to Asia in his second term. Anthony, what can we say about President Trump's Asia policy?
Well, previous administrations, such as especially President Obama's, have said they want to try to pivot to focus their attention on Asia. Trump has not. He has been mostly focused on conflicts in Europe and the Middle East. There is a central disagreement within the administration between maintaining U.S. primacy in Asia or putting America first by minding its own hemisphere. And that has aggravated fears among many nations that the U.S. will either drag its allies into unnecessary conflicts or become isolationist and just abandon them.
NPR's Anthony Kuhn joining us from Seoul, South Korea. Anthony, thanks so much.
My pleasure, Scott.
My family and I have been watching postseason baseball, and I think I have to lie down. We've seen so many ads for drugs prescribed to treat plaque psoriasis, Crohn's disease, and ulcerative colitis that I'm sure I've developed a rash, nausea, joint pain, and dizziness just by watching. iSpot, the TV ad news site, says drug companies bought $895.8 million worth of ads in sports programming last year. The commercials that run during postseason baseball are rife with talk of dermatitis, dehydration, and wheezing. It's almost a relief to see just an ad for beer or a lizard selling car insurance. The baseball playoffs are watched by millions. Dr. Caleb Alexander of the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine Center for Drug Safety and Effectiveness reminds us. These games offer drug companies a captive audience, a lot with gray hair, who may have diabetes, obesity, high cholesterol, and other common diseases. Prescription drug ads were once banned on broadcast, but companies argued that infringed on free speech, and the drugs could help people. The FDA now permits pharmaceutical ads as long as what regulators call dual modality risk statements, possible side effects, are clearly stated. And so you see commercials that show winsome old friends dancing, biking, and shooting down forested zip lines despite the shadow of psoriasis, insomnia, anxiety, or eczema. Then the same soothing voice that advises you to see a doctor for a prescription cautions the medication might also lead you to develop symptoms of myelosuppression, psoriatic arthritis, and abdominal swelling. Medicines are not inherently good or bad, advises Dr. Alexander, but direct-to-consumer advertising for drugs, he believes, may drive behavior in ways that patients and doctors, keep in mind, we are watching the baseball games too, may not even be aware of. It's not just information, notes the doctor, it's persuasion. And so now, back to baseball. Enjoy the World Series, Dodgers and Blue Jays, sports betting and beer, auto loans and iPhones, allergies, high blood pressure and narcolepsy, headache, stomach acid, and or facial swelling. Consult a doctor and do not operate heavy machinery while watching sports.
Hey, NPR listeners. Each year, NPR invites students from around the country to submit their audio stories to NPR's Student Podcast Challenge. Click to learn more and listen to stories from recent winners. Support for NPR and the Student Podcast Challenge come from Progressive Insurance. Get a quote online at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates.
Increasing strikes against alleged drug smuggling vessels in the Caribbean. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth declared that 3 such vessels were blown up just this week. But one of the vessels targeted last week included a semi-submersible, what authorities call a narco-submarine. And they say these vessels are playing a larger role in global drug trafficking. Stephen Dudley is the co-founder and co-director of Insight Crime, a nonprofit think tank and media organization that specializes in organized crime in Latin America and the Caribbean. He joins us now. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
What is a narco-sub or semi-submersible vessel?
I think it's something closer to a boat than an actual submarine. You basically fasten a very tight fiberglass or wooden hub on the top, and you put a bunch of outboard motors on it, and you run it along the surface of the sea. And it's just incredibly difficult to detect because of the way they paint it, because of the materials they use. It just makes it so it's hard to find, especially once it's out at sea.
Who's building them? I'm assuming not traditional shipyards.
Yeah, they're mostly being built in places like Colombia. That's where most of them have been seized. They are being built mostly in areas near the sea. They're being built by large organizations, but very often subcontracted out to independent producers. At this stage, you may even have specialists who just do this kind of semi-submersible. So this is part of the way that this works now.
Who's running them? Is there any one answer to that?
These are complex, multi-layered organizations that are spread across a huge geographic expanse. So even if you've got some groups that might be collecting and collating the cocaine in one spot and putting it on a semi-submersible in another spot, you might have another one that's picking it up in Europe, and then another group that is the distribution group. These are different organizations that are connecting in these different spaces through very often these subcontracted groups. So this is a mirror of the global economy, and I don't think we should think about it any differently.
And the next stage will be a craft that's utterly submersible, I gather.
Absolutely, and probably unmanned, and maybe run by artificial intelligence, or at least remotely. They're entering into the future just like we are, and we should expect them to be using all of the tools at their disposal.
Your organization has reported on a rise in seizures of this kind of vessel by different governments. Does that mean more of them are being used, or that governments are just getting better at detecting them?
Well, seizures are an imperfect measure, but if all things are sort of equal across the board, then more seizures indicates an increased use, and that's our suspicion as well. It's not just in the jungles of Colombia, which is really where most of it began, but now all the way to Europe. These are obviously indications that this is something that they're using more and more.
How much of the international drug traffic would you be able to say?
Again, it's one of these things, we don't know what we don't know, but certainly what these can do is carry large quantities. If you make a submarine, you're thinking about taking in the tons. It's one of these things that allows for them to move a lot of drugs in one fell swoop.
Now, Inside Crime had statements from U.S. officials recently saying, quote, once the subs are in open water, interception rates become extremely challenging, with interdiction rates as low as 5%, depending on conditions. But here's what Secretary Hegseth said this week.
Whether it's in the Caribbean or in the Pacific with the last two strikes, we know exactly who these people are. We know what networks they work with, what foreign terrorist organizations they're a part of. We know where they're going, where they originated from, what they're carrying.
Is the Secretary, based on your reporting, correct or hopeful?
Well, I have a lot of questions about what he just said, including if they do know so much, then why haven't they said anything about the different networks that are running these? But if we just leave that aside, by the U.S. government's own admission, extremely hard to detect once they're in open water, then again, it's very hard to take at face value what he's saying. These are difficult to detect, and it's very difficult to solve this problem, and certainly solve this problem the way that they're trying to solve it, which is just shoot them from the sky.
Stephen Dudley is the co-founder and co-director of Inside Crime. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
In just over a week, voters in California face a question that could determine who controls Congress after the 2026 midterm elections. They're deciding if the state should redistrict, giving Democrats an edge to win 5 more seats in the narrowly divided U.S. House. Now, this vote comes in response to President Trump encouraging Texas to redraw lines to favor Republicans. Cap Radio's Laura Fitzgerald reports from a part of California where Republicans could lose out.
Loomis, California is a suburban town of about 7,000 people outside of Sacramento. It's a red area represented by a Republican in Congress. But under the redistricting map on the ballot in a November 4th election, voters there would be divided and drawn into districts likely to elect Democrats. Amanda Cortez is a Republican on the town council organizing opposition.
We want to keep our communities that are like together, right? And so if we get sucked into Sacramento or somewhere, we don't share the same needs, right?
This area has lots of single-family homes on either side of a major freeway and faces suburban issues like traffic getting in and out, rapid development, and high gas prices. Mike Murray also lives in the area, and he's involved in his county's Republican club. He's voting no on the measure, called Prop 50, because he says his future votes for Congress will be swamped by the Democratic votes in nearby Sacramento.
If we wanted to live in an urban community with the problems and the benefits of an urban community, we would. But we choose to live here. And when we choose to live here, we hope that somebody will represent us in our way of life.
Usually, states redistrict at the start of the decade when the census comes out, but California Republicans could end up paying the price for the redistricting battle that President Trump has set off around the country now. Murray says for him, this isn't about national politics or redistricting in other states.
My concern has always been on our community and our representation. When things are wrong other places, doing things wrong here is not the way to go. This is something you teach your kids. 2 wrongs don't make it right.
But Trump did get Texas to write a new map that could flip 5 more seats to Republican candidates. So California's Democratic leaders say they drew their map to flip 5 seats for Democrats and counter Texas. Eric Schickler is a co-director at the Institute of Governmental Studies at the University of California, Berkeley. He says opponents to California's redistricting are concerned it'll sideline the state's independent redistricting commission that's helped give their communities a voice.
The basic argument made by opponents of Prop 50 is that the nonpartisan process, has worked well for the state. It's given rise to more competitive elections.
But for proponents, mainly Democrats, it's about Congress and the Trump administration.
To the extent that voters care about having a check on President Trump, well, you need a Democratic House to do that, is the argument that Democrats are making.
In the town of Truckee, a blue dot in the same red congressional district as Loomis, Democrats were wrapping up a meeting to organize for Prop 50. Cyan Simone sees redistricting as a chance to counteract Trump's immigration crackdown.
I have a lot of friends who are immigrants from different countries who have left authoritarian regimes, and you see the patterns, and you just don't want to see that happen here. And I don't want to have to see people who fled terrible situations having to run again.
Her husband, Ben Woodard, says redistricting could mean Democrats are able to elect a representative that'll pay more attention to what his community needs.
I think that the Democratic Party representative would do that and would look over our interests, like, the cuts to Medicare definitely impacted rural health care.
The proponents appear to have the upper hand heading into the November 4th election. It's a state where most voters are Democrats, and they see this election as part of a national struggle. For NPR News, I'm Laura Fitzgerald in Sacramento.
Of dynamite, the U.S. president has just minutes to decide on how to respond to an apparent nuclear attack.
We've already lost one American city today.
This is insanity, okay?
No, sir. This is reality.
That's Idris Elba playing the president. The movie, directed by Catherine Bigelow, premiered on Netflix yesterday. NPR's Jeff Brumfield has seen the film. He's spoken to experts about its depiction of nuclear war, and he joins us now. Jeff, thanks so much for being with us.
Good to be here.
Please set up the scenario for us.
Right. So basically, it involves a single missile launching from somewhere in the Pacific. It's headed towards the American heartland. And the film follows the U.S.'s military and political leaders as they discuss what they're going to do over what's kind of like the Zoom call of doom, I guess.
And I sure hope it's not actually on Zoom. This is something that would really happen?
Yeah. The conference call isn't actually on Zoom as far as I know, but there is something called a missile attack conference call, according to unclassified documents, and that's really the way a decision would be made about how to respond to this kind of scenario. And I heard a lot of praise for the depiction of the call from experts. The situation rooms and command bunkers in this movie look like the real thing, according to people who've seen them. One I spoke to was Rose Gadamoller, a former State Department official and Deputy Secretary General of NATO.
So the sit room at the White House, for example, absolutely pitch perfect. That deep underground command and control site at Omaha, scarily authentic. I don't know if they actually got to film in there or not, but scarily authentic.
Same goes for the techno-babble and jargon used throughout the film by its characters. This is a trademark Catherine Bigelow thing. It's all pretty dead on. And, so is the fundamental premise of the film that one person, the president, has the sole authority to launch a nuclear counterstrike. That's the way a system is set up. He really would have just a few minutes to make a decision.
So, Jeff, if I were to watch the film, and the reviews have been very good, I probably will. Am I going to be chilled to the center of my soul afterwards?
Well, you will, I think. It's fair to say. It's a disturbing film in a lot of ways. But to put your mind at ease, there are also some inaccuracies. I mean, first of all, Hollywood loves this sort of out-of-the-blue attack scenario, but experts generally agree it's probably not how nuclear war starts. Here's Jeffrey Lewis, a scholar of global security at Middlebury College.
I mean, it made no sense. No one starts a nuclear war with one missile without having a plan for what comes next.
And same goes for some of the advice the president gets. So there's one scene here where the general in charge of Strategic Command, played by Tracy Letts, says this to the president.
If we do not take steps to neutralize our enemies now, we will lose our window to do so.
That's the movie. In real life, the president probably wouldn't have to decide, whether to end the world with a massive counterattack in 20 minutes. He could wait and see if the attack was a fake or a dud. If the nuke did explode, hundreds of thousands of Americans would die. That would be awful. But U.S. forces are spread out and can survive a single warhead. So the president might not actually face the scenario in the movie where he has just minutes to decide whether to launch all of America's nukes.
Jeff, how in the pantheon of nuclear war films, how does this one stand?
You know, I think making a good nuclear war film is tough. I mean, there's kind of only one plot line and only one outcome. It's never good, right? Overall, this one was pretty good. It maybe wasn't my favorite, which is sort of like Dr. Strangelove or Threads from 1984, if you get a chance. But I will say that the Threads